My parents threw me out, saying, "Don't steal your sister's house." In court, my 7-year-old asked the judge, "Can I show you something Mom doesn't know?" The judge nodded. She held up her tablet, pressed play, and when it started, everything changed. I had spent the last few months holding my breath, waiting for the moment when my life would tip over into something I couldn't fix. I'm Claire, 34 years old, and I thought I knew the rules, But nothing prepares you for the day you realize your own parents are treating you like an outsider in the place you call home. The story they told in that courtroom was neat, tidy, a story about generous parents and a daughter who'd overstayed her welcome. But it wasn't my story. The house wasn't theirs. It was mine. Well, at least it felt like mine. I'd paid the mortgage every month, called the repairman when things broke, dealt with the HOA, the utilities, the bills, all of it. My daughter Piper, the only family I had left after my divorce, had grown up in that house. But my parents weren't seeing it that way. They'd spent months planting seeds, hinting that the house was always meant for my sister, Haley. They were ready to take it back, and the story they crafted made me sound like the villain, the one refusing to leave when it was her turn. And then came Piper, walking up to the front of the courtroom, her little hand clutching a tablet. "Can I show you something Mom doesn't know?" she'd asked. The judge nodded, probably assuming it was some innocent child's attempt to bring a little light into a heavy moment. What happened next felt like a punch to the gut. As soon as Piper pressed play, I saw the truth in a way I'd never expected. The room went cold. My parents, the people who had supposedly supported me, the ones I thought would have my back, had been caught in their own web of lies. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my life, for the home I had built with nothing but sweat, tears, and the quiet hope that one day, it would be enough. The truth was out, and it was devastating. After my divorce from Marcus Lee, I found myself in a place I never imagined. The bills piled up, medical debts from a few rough years added to the mess, and my credit was shot. I didn't have enough for a deposit on a new place, and even if I did, I couldn't afford the rent. The only thing that mattered was Piper. She needed a stable home, a place that wasn't going to change every few months. But stability felt like a dream I couldn't reach. That's when my parents stepped in. They offered me a solution that sounded like a lifeline. They would buy a townhome in a quiet neighborhood outside the city, put it in their names, and let me live there while I got back on my feet. I'd cover the mortgage, utilities, and the bills. They'd take care of the paperwork I couldn't handle on my own. It felt like a fresh start. At first, I thought it was a generous offer, one that would help me breathe again. I moved in with Piper and started to make it home. It wasn't much, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I picked out cheap curtains, secondhand furniture, and painted one wall in the living room. I turned the smallest bedroom into Piper's space, decorating it with glow-in, the dark stars on the ceiling. Every month, I sent the payment for the mortgage, kept the utilities running, and paid for repairs when something broke. My parents, on the other hand, would visit occasionally. They brought groceries, watered the porch plants when I worked late, and seemed proud of the place. They told me how well I was doing. They'd introduced the neighborhood to their friends, as if they were the ones who had made this happen. But I was the one who lived there, the one who handled everything. They would refer to it as an investment for the family. But I started to notice how they never mentioned my role in the house. It didn't take long for me to realize that their support wasn't as unconditional as it seemed. They began to drop comments about the future of the house. They didn't always say my name when they imagined what would happen to it. Sometimes they'd talk about how the house would be perfect for Haley when she was ready to settle down. They'd call it an investment, leaving my part out of the picture. I told myself it didn't matter. I had the roof over my head, and Piper had her bedroom. But then the comments started getting sharper, more direct. One afternoon, my parents invited me and Piper over for dinner. I thought it would just be another family meal, a chance to catch up without any talk about money or property. I was wrong. My mother started talking about the neighborhood near my town home, listing off its good points: safety, a park down the street, the grocery store nearby, and she turned the conversation toward Haley, saying how it would be perfect for her. She mentioned how Haley had been thinking about settling down, and that the townhome would be just right for her. My father didn't hesitate to agree, speaking about it like it was already decided. He talked about how it would help Haley build stability, how it was just the kind of place she needed. My role in the story was fading, and I could feel it. My chest tightened as I realized what was happening. They were planning to give the house to Haley, and I was just a temporary guest in their eyes. Haley didn't seem to notice. She leaned into the attention, talking about how tired she was of living in an apartment with thin walls. How great it would be to live near our parents. She spoke about my kitchen as if it were already a part of her future. I could see it then. The house I had worked so hard to make a home, the place I had built from nothing, was being quietly written off as something that wasn't mine anymore. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake what had just happened. I thought about all the things I had done to keep this place running, all the sacrifices I had made. The meals I had cooked in that kitchen, the nights I'd spent fixing leaks, paying bills with no help. None of that mattered to my parents. They saw me as just a stepping stone, a bridge to get Haley where she needed to be. As I drove home that night, Piper chatted about dessert and games in the back seat. I let her voice fill the silence, trying to push the hurt away. But I couldn't ignore what had just unfolded. My parents had already made up their minds. They didn't see me as part of their future plan. They saw me as someone blocking the way. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just fighting to stay in a house, I was fighting to keep my life, my choices, and my daughter's future in my hands. The letter came in the mail a few days after dinner, and the moment I saw the return address, I knew it wasn't going to be good. My parents had hired an attorney to make their intentions clear. Clear in a way that no family dinner had been. The letter was short and cold, its language clinical. It didn't say, "We're sorry," or "We've been thinking about this for a while." No, It simply stated that I had overstayed my welcome in their property. It referred to the town home as a temporary arrangement and laid out a timeline for me to vacate the house. 45 days. I stared at the paper, my throat tightening as I read the words over and over again. I'd paid every bill, handled every repair, dealt with every issue that had come up in the time I'd lived there. I had made that house my home, and it was the only home my daughter had ever known. Yet, according to this letter, it was never truly mine. The coldness of it hit me hardest when I saw how they described my role in all of this. I was a guest. A guest who was no longer welcome. I wasn't a daughter who had built a life in that house. I wasn't a mother who had worked hard to provide stability for her child. I was a tenant who had overstayed her lease, and now it was time for me to leave. I spent the rest of that evening numb. My stomach churned, my head swam with thoughts I couldn't make sense of. I'd expected resistance, maybe some tension, but this was something else. The legalities, the formality of it, felt like an attack on everything I had done. Every corner of that house I had scrubbed and painted. Every inch of it that was marked by Piper's drawings. Every little detail that made it home for us. None of that mattered. I couldn't talk to Marcus about it. He and I had already had enough of our own arguments, our own issues. So I sat on it. I let it simmer until the only thing I could focus on was how badly I wanted to scream. But there was no one to scream at. I didn't know where to direct my anger. At my parents for doing this, or at myself for not seeing it sooner. The truth had always been there, right in front of me, and I had ignored it. That night, after Piper went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents I'd already read 10 times. My fingers shook as I reached for my phone and called Tessa. Tessa Grant, my best friend. She knew what it was like to fight for what was hers. She'd gone through a landlord dispute a few years ago, and it had turned her into a warrior. She would understand what I needed to do next. When we met after work, Tessa didn't tell me to smooth things over with my parents. She didn't tell me to talk it out or figure out a compromise. She just looked at me and asked a simple question. What can you prove? I stared at her, not sure what she meant. What do you mean, prove? Tessa took a sip of her coffee and said, You're going to need to show them who's been paying for this house. Do you have any proof? I nodded. I had receipts, bank statements, proof that the mortgage had come out of my account month after month. And the repair bills, the ones I'd paid out of my own pocket, were all there. Tessa's eyes lit up when she heard that. Then you have your proof. You're not just a guest. You've built this house with your own hands. Now it's time to take that to court. I didn't feel ready. How could I be? I'd spent years trusting my parents, believing that the arrangement was temporary, that one day I'd get my life together and the house would be mine, in some way. But now, the truth was clear. It wasn't mine at all. I went home that night and started gathering everything. Bank statements, proof of payments, emails from my mother where she thanked me for covering the bills, repair invoices. Everything I could find. The more I collected, the clearer it became. I wasn't the one who had overstayed their welcome. They were the ones who had overstepped. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't just a legal fight. It was about my parents treating me like I didn't belong. It was about the way they had tried to erase the years of my life I had poured into that house. It was about the betrayal I felt, the kind that cut deeper than any legal ruling could fix. The camera installation had been Tessa's idea. I hadn't wanted to do it, but something inside me told me it was the right thing. A boundary. A small, silent defense against the people who had keys to my life, but didn't seem to respect it. I set it up reluctantly, feeling like a fool, like I didn't trust my own family. But I didn't trust them. Not anymore. The camera sat there, recording nothing of consequence for weeks. But I had no idea that, one day, it would record everything. The night before the meeting with the attorney, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the house, our house, and the subtle changes I'd started to notice. My parents had always been controlling, but this felt different. It wasn't just about them helping out. It was about them taking something from me, something that I had worked for, piece by piece. The next morning, I pulled myself together and drove to the meeting. Marcus had agreed to meet me there, to help with the legal stuff. I wasn't sure how I felt about him being there, but he was the father of my child. He had a right to know what was happening, even if things between us were still tense. I handed the attorney the papers I had gathered, the bank statements, the repair bills, the emails. As I spoke about the house, the years I had spent paying the mortgage, dealing with repairs, and keeping the place running, I could feel my hands shaking. It wasn't just the paperwork, it was the weight of my parents' betrayal. I had trusted them. They were supposed to be my support system, not the ones who would kick me out. The attorney was efficient, but he was also clear. He said the case was complicated. On paper, my parents owned the house, and that would make any legal claim from me difficult. But the fact that I had been paying the bills, making the decisions, and maintaining the house for years, gave me a fighting chance. We can't ignore the emotional aspect of this, the attorney said. This isn't just about money. It's about your life, your daughter's life, and what you've built together here. I nodded, but I didn't feel any better. The truth was, I had no idea how this would end. All I could do was fight, and hope it was enough. After the meeting, Marcus and I went to lunch. The tension between us was thick, and we didn't talk much. He didn't understand why I didn't just walk away from the fight. Why keep dragging this out, Claire? He asked, his voice low. It's not worth it. But it was worth it. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for respect, for my daughter's future. I wouldn't let my parents erase what I had worked for. I couldn't just let them have it all, as if I was nothing but a guest in my own life. I left lunch feeling worse than when I arrived. I wanted to believe Marcus, that maybe walking away would end the pain. But I knew deep down that if I gave up now, I would never be able to look myself in the mirror. I would never be able to tell Piper that I fought for her. The next few days passed in a blur of calls, emails, and meetings. It felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. Every day, I would return to the house and try to make it feel like home for Piper. But it was harder and harder to ignore the sense of dread hanging over us. And then came the letter. The letter that would change everything. It wasn't from the attorney. It wasn't even addressed to me. It was a simple, cold letter, slipped under the door. Please call us as soon as possible, M. We have an important update regarding your living arrangements. I didn't have to read it again. I already knew what it meant. I called my parents that evening, but there was no answer. I tried again the next day. Still nothing. It felt like they were shutting me out. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. I hated how they made me feel. Like I was the problem, like my life didn't matter. That's when I decided to do something I had never thought I would. I called Tessa. I needed her help. She had always been my sounding board, the person who saw things clearly when I couldn't. She met me at the house a few hours later, and as soon as I told her what had happened, she got to work. She asked me all the right questions. What could I prove? What evidence did I have? The more I dug into the situation, the more I realized just how much I had been blind to. Tessa was the one who suggested the camera. At first, I thought she was crazy. I had never imagined needing to take such drastic steps with my own family. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I needed to protect myself, to prove that I wasn't just a tenant. I was a mother who had given everything for this home. The camera went up quietly, unnoticed by anyone, at least for now. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but it was also a necessary step to protect myself and my daughter. I didn't know then how important that camera would be. How much it would change everything. The letter from my parents was like a weight that hung over me for days. Every time I looked at it, I felt the air in my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the eviction. It was the finality of it all. The way they had wrapped up years of my life into a few cold paragraphs. I had always believed that family was about more than property. About more than the things we could touch and own. But this letter made me realize how wrong I had been. The fight wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me, my daughter, and my right to be seen. My parents had always made decisions for me, but I had never felt like I had to fight for my place in their world. I had always thought I could trust them, that they understood the sacrifices I made, the late nights, the repairs, the bills. But it turned out, none of that mattered to them. I spent the next few days making phone calls and preparing for the worst. I met with the attorney again, and we went through the details of the case. He seemed optimistic about our chances, but I could see in his eyes that he was trying to reassure me, not just with words, but with his presence. He understood the emotional toll it was taking on me, but he knew we had to focus on the facts. I spent hours compiling more evidence, receipts, emails, bank statements, proof that I had been the one holding up the house, that I had put my name and energy into it. But even with all the paperwork, I knew there was one thing that was still out of my control. My parents' narrative. They had made their decision, and they had already built their case. Their version of the story painted me as someone who had been granted a favor, a charity case. But that wasn't how I saw it. What was hardest to accept was how easily they'd shifted their position. For years, I had believed that they were helping me, but now I saw it as nothing more than a transaction. They had given me the house on their terms, and now they wanted to take it back on the same terms. They were the ones with the power to decide my future. I thought about the years I had spent making that house a home. The small repairs, the emergency plumbing issues in the middle of the night, the times I had taken out a loan just to fix the air conditioning. And all of it had been done in silence. There had been no fanfare, no applause from my parents. It had just been me, doing what needed to be done to make sure my daughter had a stable home. But now, in the eyes of my parents, I was nothing more than a temporary guest who had overstayed her welcome. It stung, but I wasn't going to let it break me. As the days wore on, I couldn't stop thinking about my daughter. How would she understand this? How could I explain to her why her grandparents were asking us to leave the only home she had ever known? She was too young to comprehend the complexities of what was happening. But I knew she felt the tension. She had started asking questions about why her grandparents weren't visiting as much, why things felt different. I couldn't give her answers, not yet. On the evening before the court date, I sat at the kitchen table. The one where I had eaten so many meals with Piper. The house felt empty, even though I was surrounded by everything I had worked to create. I glanced around, noticing all the little things that made it ours. Piper's artwork on the fridge, the mismatched chairs at the dining table, the stack of books on the counter. It all felt so fragile, like it could slip away at any moment. That's when I decided I had to take action. I couldn't let this go on. I had to take control, not just of the house, but of my own life. I couldn't let my parents define my future, not when I had worked so hard to build something for myself and Piper. I called Tessa that night. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's do this." She was on the other end of the line before I could even finish the sentence. "You've got this, Claire," she said. "We'll make sure they can't take this from you." The next morning, I took Piper to school, my mind racing. I had no idea how things would play out in court, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going down without a fight. As I walked back to the car, the weight of the situation settled over me. But it was different now. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for respect, for my family, for the life I had built with my own two hands. And I would do whatever it took to protect it. The court hearing was the next step in a journey I never expected to take, but I was ready. Ready to face whatever came my way. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I hardly slept the night before, pacing through the house, making sure everything was in its place, as if organizing my home would somehow organize my thoughts. I tried to focus on the fact that I had gathered everything I needed: bank statements, repair bills, emails from my mother, where she thanked me for handling the mortgage, the fees, and the repairs. It felt like a mountain of proof, but even as I went through it all, I still wasn't sure it would be enough. My parents had the deed to the house, and on paper, they held all the power. When I walked into the courtroom, the weight of the room pressed down on me. I hadn't been to a courtroom since my divorce, but even that didn't compare to the feeling of standing there with my entire life at stake. My parents sat on one side, composed, their attorney at their side. Across the room, I felt small and out of place, but I had to stay focused. This wasn't just about a house. It was about proving I had a right to my own life. Marcus was there with Piper. It was the first time I had seen him in weeks without a sharp edge between us. His eyes were full of concern for Piper, who had been unusually quiet that morning. She sat between Marcus and the easel, her little hands fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. I couldn't look at her too much. I knew if I did, I'd lose it. I needed to stay strong. The opposing attorney spoke first. His voice was smooth, confident, rehearsed. He painted a picture of generous parents who had given me a chance to get back on my feet, providing a home where I could live while I recovered from the financial mess of my divorce. I felt like I was being erased with every word he spoke. He talked about the house as if it had been a gift, as if the years I had spent maintaining it didn't count. He framed my refusal to leave as cruelty, as if my need to stay was somehow a selfish act. I could feel my heart race as I listened to him. His version of events was tidy, easy to digest, but it wasn't true. It wasn't my truth. When it was my turn, I stood, opening the folder that held everything I had gathered. The judge looked at me, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't afford to get emotional. Not now. "I'm not stealing anything," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "I've been paying for this house for years. I've maintained it, repaired it, and made it a home for my daughter. It's not just a property to me. It's our home." I laid out the bank statements, the invoices for repairs, and the emails. Each piece of paper felt like a small victory. A little proof that I wasn't the villain they painted me to be. The judge listened, asking a few questions here and there to clarify the details. She noted the absence of a formal lease, the fact that my parents held the deed, and the financials behind the mortgage payments. It felt like the room was closing in. Every word I spoke, every piece of evidence I presented, seemed to fade in comparison to the ownership my parents had on paper. They looked at me, and I could feel the weight of their disappointment, their judgment. It was like they were hearing me, but not listening. They were ready to end this, to make their decision. I was just the obstacle. Then, something happened that I never could have predicted. Piper, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. Her little body was trembling, but she walked with determination down the aisle to the front of the courtroom. The judge glanced at me, probably wondering what was going on. I nodded, not sure where this was going, but knowing my daughter wasn't the kind of child to act without a reason. Piper set her tablet down on the stand in front of the judge, pressed a button, and the room went silent. As the video played, I watched my parents and sister walk through the front door of my house, talking about how the rooms would be arranged once I was gone. They were discussing the house like it was already Haley's. My parents stiffened when they realized what was happening. I could see them physically shrink, the confidence they'd had when they walked in now replaced by unease. They were caught. The video didn't lie. It showed them walking through my home, making plans for a future that didn't include me or Piper. When the video stopped, there was a long pause, and the silence in the room felt deafening. The judge looked at my parents, then at me. Her expression softened. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice calm but firm. The evidence before me shows that this home has been occupied and maintained by Miss Hayes for years. The emotional and financial investments made by her are undeniable. The actions captured in this video raise significant questions about your intentions. I held my breath as the judge turned her attention to the next steps. I couldn't believe it. The truth was finally out in the open. My parents, the ones I had trusted, had tried to rewrite my life, but now it couldn't be ignored. The judge continued. "I find that the request to remove Miss Hayes from her home is unjustified. The case is dismissed." For a moment, I couldn't process the words. My mind was spinning, the adrenaline rushing through my veins. We had won. The house was mine. But the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by everything else. My parents sat in stunned silence, their carefully constructed narrative crumbling around them. I looked at Piper, who was still standing by the front, her eyes wide. She had saved me. She had saved us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The days after the court ruling were surreal. I walked through the house, but it felt different now. The weight I'd carried for so long, the fear that I could lose it all, was finally lifted. But even in the relief, there was something hollow. The victory was mine, but the damage had been done. I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to feel hurt, but the truth was, I couldn't just turn it off. My parents weren't just disappointed in me, they had actively tried to take my home from me, to erase the life I had worked so hard to build. And I couldn't ignore that. No matter how much I tried to, the sting of it would linger. At first, my parents didn't respond. They didn't call. They didn't try to contact me at all. I was surprised by how quiet it was, how much they respected the ruling. But I wasn't naive enough to believe it was over. The silence was just the calm before the storm. I had my attorney send a letter that laid out the boundaries. My parents were no longer welcome to come into my home unannounced. And any discussions about the house had to be handled through legal channels. I wasn't just reclaiming the physical space, I was reclaiming my life, my dignity. When I told Marcus about the letter, he agreed it was necessary. But I could tell he didn't fully understand why it felt so important to me. He never had to fight for his place in his family the way I had. His family had always treated him as an equal. My family had used me, manipulated me, and when I'd refused to play their game, they tried to make me disappear. I couldn't let that go. As the days went by, the calls started coming in. At first, it was just a few missed messages from my mom. She left long voicemails, some of them frantic, others cold, accusing me of ruining the family, of humiliating her. Her voice cracked in one message when she said, I had made her feel like an outsider. But I wasn't the one who had done that. She had chosen this path. She had chosen to treat me like nothing more than an obstacle. I didn't listen to all of them. I didn't need to. I saved the voicemails, just in case I ever needed proof of what had happened, of how far they had gone. It was one thing to be upset. It was another to try and manipulate me through guilt. I couldn't let that happen. Haley, on the other hand, took a different approach. She posted a tearful video online, talking about how she had lost her chance at owning her first home. The video was full of half-truths, designed to make me look like the villain. She hinted that I had stolen something that wasn't mine. Within hours, her social media exploded. People who barely knew her started asking questions about the house, about me. The comments turned sharply critical, some even calling her out for posting about something that wasn't hers to claim. The video was quickly taken down, but the damage had already been done. Haley went quiet after that. Her account was deleted. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had tried to paint me as the villain, or the realization that she wasn't really part of my life anymore. It had always been us, my sister and me, but now it felt like I didn't even know her. Back at the house, life started to settle into a new routine. Piper was more relaxed. She laughed more, played more. It was like the weight that had been on her shoulders was finally gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could see her carefree again. She asked questions about the house, about why we had to change the locks and why Grandma and Grandpa couldn't come over without asking. It was hard to explain, but I told her the truth. I told her that adults are responsible for their own choices, and that she had done nothing wrong. The days passed, and things went back to a kind of normal. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be. One evening, after dinner, as we were cleaning up, Piper asked me a question that broke something open inside me. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me? She asked, her small voice unsure. I paused, wiping down the table, unsure of how to answer. I didn't want to lie to her. No, honey, I said softly. They're not mad at you. They're just upset about what happened with the house. But that's between them and me. You didn't do anything wrong. You told the truth, and that was the right thing to do. Piper accepted it, as only children can, and went on to finish cleaning up. But I stood there for a moment, the weight of it all settling over me. For the first time, I realized how much of my battle had been about protecting her, not just from my parents, but from the emotional toll this was taking on both of us. The house wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was where we had built something together, something real. Every time I looked around, I saw our life. Piper's drawings on the fridge, the mismatched furniture that had somehow become our signature. The house had become ours, and in that moment, I realized that the fight I had won wasn't just about ownership, it was about reclaiming our place in the world. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. Even if my parents never understood, I had finally stopped pretending I needed their approval. And that was enough. The weeks after the court hearing were a blur of normalcy settling back into my life. But nothing was quite the same. My parents stayed away, and for a while, I wondered if they were simply biding their time, waiting for the next move. The silence was uncomfortable, but it was a silence I had grown used to. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the constant pressure of their expectations, of their silent judgments. Piper was thriving again. She was laughing more, playing more freely. It wasn't just about the legal victory. It was about the stability we had found. Something I had fought so hard for. I watched her as she hung her backpack on the same hook. she'd always used, her drawings still taped to the fridge. The house was still ours in a way that felt more real now than ever before. But there was also a distance between me and my family that couldn't be bridged, not after everything that had happened. The truth had come out in a way I never imagined, and now I saw them differently. I saw the manipulation, the way they had used their power over me, and it wasn't something I could ignore. They had been ready to push me out of my home without a second thought. And for what? To give it to Haley, to make their lives easier. To erase everything I had done for my daughter and me. I changed the locks soon after the hearing, not just as a security measure, but as a way to protect my space, to protect my peace. The locks felt symbolic. They were a physical barrier to the world I was no longer willing to let in, especially not my parents, not without respect, not without boundaries. I had the locksmith replace the deadbolts and the front door handle, and when I held the new set of keys in my hand, I felt a surge of power. This was my home, and it was mine by every right. Not just because of the court ruling, but because I had earned it, every single day. The first time I saw my parents after the ruling was at a family gathering, a holiday dinner that they insisted on hosting. I hesitated. I hadn't wanted to see them so soon after everything had gone down, but they had requested it, and I couldn't avoid them forever. Piper needed to understand that families sometimes have difficult moments, but that doesn't mean they can't find a way to be together. When I walked in, the air was thick with tension. My parents didn't look at me the same way they used to. There was a coldness in their gaze, an unspoken resentment that hung between us. But I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like I was walking into their world, trying to fit into their expectations. I could tell my mother was hurt, that she was still processing what had happened. But I wasn't going to apologize for standing my ground. I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't made the right choice. And for the first time, I felt no guilt about it. Haley wasn't there, of course. She had taken the video down after the backlash, and I hadn't heard from her since. I didn't know what was going through her head, but I knew the way she had tried to manipulate the situation had been a line I couldn't cross. I couldn't pretend we could just go back to the way things were. I couldn't pretend that nothing had changed. My mother's attempt at small talk felt forced, and my father remained silent, picking at his food with a look of quiet disapproval. But it didn't matter. For once, I didn't feel the need to make excuses for my choices. I had done what I needed to do. I had fought for my home, for my daughter, and for myself. Later that night, after we had returned to the house, Piper asked me about the visit. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative, "are they mad at us?" I paused, trying to find the right words. I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want to burden her with more than she needed to know. "I don't know, sweetie," I said. But they'll have to figure out what's best for them, and we'll keep doing what's best for us." She seemed to accept it, letting the matter drop, but I could tell it had been on her mind. She had always been so observant, so sensitive to the things happening around her. I wished I could shield her from it all, but I knew I couldn't. What mattered now was that we were safe, that we had a future together, and that I had taken control of my life, in a way I never had before. The weeks turned into months, and the distance between my parents and me grew. The phone calls became fewer, and the messages from my mother turned into brief updates about Piper. I responded politely, but I didn't reach out first. Not anymore. I couldn't say it was easy. It wasn't. There were days when the weight of what had happened still pressed down on me. But I knew, deep down, that I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, for my daughter, and for the home we had built. And that was something no one could take away from me. As I looked around the house, the one I had fought for, I realized it wasn't just the walls that made it a home. It was the love, the effort, and the resilience that had gone into making it ours. No matter what had happened, no matter how my family had treated me, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Boundaries are not just lines we draw. They are the walls that protect us, the ones we build when we decide to stop letting others decide who we are. And for the first time in years, I finally felt like I could breathe.